When a man with avoidant tendencies meets a woman who's just an option, you can almost feel the invisible distance between them. He might seem charming, confident, and easygoing at first, but everything about his emotional energy feels carefully managed. He never lets her get too close, never reveals too much, and never allows her presence to feel essential. His texts are consistent enough to keep her interested, but never deep enough to build true connection. He knows how to make her feel special in moments, but he withdraws the second things start feeling emotionally intimate. It's not that he doesn't like her, it's that he's terrified of what emotional closeness might demand from him. When she's just an option, he doesn't feel the need to risk vulnerability. He stays in control. He likes her company, but he keeps it at arm's length. The avoidant man's emotional rhythm is predictable in this phase. He opens just enough to create attraction, then pulls away when it begins to feel real. He thrives on that gray area, where there's enough affection to feed his ego, but not enough depth to threaten his emotional independence. When she asks about his feelings, he might laugh it off, change the subject, or use logic to deflect emotion. When she expresses vulnerability, he subtly distances himself, afraid that her openness will demand his own. He may still see her, still text her, still flirt, but the emotional temperature always remains lukewarm. His world stays safe and under control, untouched by the risk of genuine connection. But when an avoidant meets the 1%, everything starts to shift, and he feels it even before he fully understands it. There's a quiet tension inside him, a pull he can't rationalize. Suddenly, the walls that once protected him start to feel like barriers, keeping him away from something he actually wants. He finds himself thinking about her when he's supposed to be focused on other things. The conversations that used to bore him with others now feel alive and magnetic. For the first time, he feels emotionally exposed, not because she demanded it, but because she draws it out of him naturally. There's a safety in her presence, a calmness in her energy that makes him want to lower his guard. He won't do it all at once. In fact, the process is almost invisible from the outside. It starts in the smallest moments, the way he stays in the conversation a little longer, the way he admits something slightly vulnerable, the way he doesn't feel the need to impress her because being authentic feels more fulfilling than performing. You can sense his confusion because vulnerability feels like unfamiliar territory. He might still pull away at times, but now it's not to escape boredom, it's to regulate fear. Fear of being seen, fear of losing control, fear that she might actually matter enough to hurt him. When she's just an option, emotions are something to avoid. When she's the one, emotions become something to explore. He starts to listen differently. He starts to remember details, not out of obligation, but because they matter to him. He begins to feel protective, not possessive. The same man who once avoided deep conversations now finds himself craving them because through her presence, he feels understood in a way he's never been before. It's as if her calm dissolves his chaos. And that's when the emotional distance begins to collapse. Not through pressure or persuasion, but through connection. He may not always express it perfectly. His affection might still look cautious, inconsistent, even hesitant. But if you look closely, you'll see his effort. The tone of his voice softens, his eyes linger longer, and he starts letting her see sides of him he used to keep hidden. Those small moments of openness are not random. They're his quiet way of saying, "You're different." The emotional availability he once withheld now begins to unfold, slowly but unmistakably, because for the first time, being close doesn't feel like losing himself. It feels like finding peace. When a man with avoidant tendencies sees a woman as just an option, everything between them revolves around control. He wants to be the one who decides when to talk, when to meet, and how deep the connection goes. He keeps the pace slow, the emotions measured, and the relationship in a space that feels comfortable for him, safe but detached. Every interaction feels balanced on his terms. If she gets too close, he steps back. If she starts to pull away, he gives her just enough attention to keep her orbiting around him. Control becomes his way of maintaining emotional safety, because the idea of truly connecting, of being seen or needed, threatens the part of him that fears vulnerability. When she's just an option, he's not trying to build something real, he's trying to manage something convenient. He creates an emotional environment that allows him to stay detached while still feeling desired. It's a subtle dance of presence and withdrawal. He may come across as mysterious or independent, but beneath that calm surface lies the quiet calculation of someone who fears losing his sense of control. Every time she expresses deeper interest, he redirects it. He'll say things like, "Let's just see where this goes," or "I'm not ready for anything serious right now," because that language keeps him in charge of emotional depth. It gives him room to breathe and keeps her expectations limited. For him, connection without commitment feels like freedom, and freedom is what he values most until he meets someone who changes the entire equation. When he meets the one, control begins to lose its power. For the first time, connection starts to feel more meaningful than control. It confuses him at first, because the same emotional patterns that used to protect him now begin to feel like barriers. He can't stop thinking about her, and that thought alone unsettles him. He wants to be near her, even when his instincts tell him to pull away. His conversations with her don't feel like a performance. They feel real. He doesn't have to force interest or manage the moment. He's drawn to her presence not because she fits his idea of perfection, but because she feels genuine, grounded, and emotionally available in ways he's never allowed himself to be. Control starts to shift into connection through vulnerability. He begins to open up without realizing it, sharing small personal stories, revealing glimpses of his fears or past hurts. These aren't things he would normally tell anyone, but with her, it feels natural. His defenses lower, not because she demands honesty, but because she embodies it. She doesn't chase his attention or try to change him. She just remains steady, and that steadiness becomes magnetic. Slowly, his need to control every emotional variable starts to fade, replaced by a quiet desire to be close, even when it scares him. That's the paradox of the avoidant when he meets the one. Connection becomes both the most frightening and the most freeing experience of his life. He starts to realize that true intimacy isn't about losing control, it's about trusting someone enough to not need it. He begins to understand that connection doesn't strip away his independence, it deepens it, because when he's with her, he doesn't feel trapped, he feels understood. That sense of emotional safety becomes stronger than the comfort of control ever was. You can see the difference in his behavior. When she's just an option, every step toward closeness feels forced. When she's the one, closeness feels like gravity. He stops strategizing his emotions and starts surrendering to them. He doesn't just show up physically, he becomes emotionally present. The quiet power he once gained from staying in control now comes from being connected, and that's how you know she's more than an option, because she becomes the only person who makes him feel that connection is worth the risk of letting go. When a man with avoidant tendencies sees a woman as just an option, his time becomes his greatest tool for control. He treats it like currency, something to spend only when it benefits him, never when it requires effort or emotional presence. You'll notice he's always busy. He has work, gym, plans with friends, personal goals, and endless distractions that seem to take priority. His schedule becomes his shield, a way to keep the relationship comfortably distant. He doesn't completely disappear. He simply offers time in fragments. Maybe a late night text, a casual meetup, or a spontaneous call when it suits him. These moments feel enough to keep the connection alive, but never enough to make it grow. When she asks to see him, he often replies with, "Let's play it by ear," or "This week's been crazy." He hides behind uncertainty to avoid accountability, keeping his emotional world unbothered and predictable. Time for the avoidant is safety. It allows him to regulate how much of himself he gives. When she's just an option, he'll show up when it's convenient, when he's lonely, when it's easy, when it doesn't cost him any vulnerability. He prefers relationships that exist in the margins of his life, not at the center. He'll give just enough to make her feel there's potential, but never enough to create emotional consistency. His time investment is transactional, not emotional. If she pulls away, he might suddenly reappear, not because he misses her deeply, but because he fears losing control of the dynamic. The connection becomes a loop of temporary engagement and distant withdrawal, but everything changes when he meets the one. Suddenly, time stops being a tool for avoidance and starts becoming a way of expressing care. Without even realizing it, he starts making space for her. He rearranges plans, not because she asks, but because he wants to. The excuses he once leaned on, I'm too busy, I need space, I've got a lot going on, begin to sound hollow even to him. He starts to crave her presence in the moments he used to guard so tightly. She's no longer a distraction from his world, she becomes part of it. When she's the one, time with her doesn't feel like an interruption, it feels like home. He starts to linger on calls, extend conversations, and choose connection over convenience. The same man who once texted sporadically now checks in just to hear her voice. He might not even know why, but there's a pull, a quiet need to keep her close. For someone who's spent years protecting his independence, this shift feels unsettling yet liberating. He's no longer managing time, he's investing it. And every time he chooses to stay present, he's subconsciously saying, "And you matter to me more than my comfort zone." It begins to notice the difference between spending time and sharing time. With her, hours pass differently. They feel lighter, meaningful, unforced. He finds himself remembering small things about her. The way she talks when she's passionate, the things that make her laugh, the little details she shares about her day. These are things an avoidant man doesn't usually hold on to, but with her, he pays attention. It's not about obligation. It's about genuine interest. The woman who is the one doesn't chase his time. She earns it naturally through connection, respect, and emotional calmness. What used to feel like pressure now feels like peace. When he's with her, he's not thinking about the next task or trying to escape the moment. He's fully there. And that's when you know something real has shifted. Avoidants don't give time easily. They give it when their heart begins to trust. The woman who becomes the one doesn't demand more of his schedule. She draws more of his presence. Time becomes the quiet proof of his emotional evolution. Because for a man who once feared closeness, giving his time is his most intimate form of love. When a man with avoidant tendencies sees a woman as just an option, his conversations with her rarely go beyond the surface. He keeps things light, entertaining, and safe. He'll talk about work, travel, weekend plans, or random interests, but never about feelings, fears, or anything that makes him emotionally visible. He's charming, even funny, but guarded. Every word feels rehearsed to avoid vulnerability. If she tries to deepen the conversation, to understand what's really going on beneath his calm exterior, he redirects, changes the topic, or answers with vague, emotionally distant lines. He prefers control, and deep conversations threaten that control because they expose his emotional truth. The part of him he spent years trying to protect. He's comfortable living on the surface because it gives him the illusion of connection without the reality of emotional risk. He wants her to feel close enough to stay interested, but not close enough to see through him. When she shares something vulnerable, he listens politely but rarely reciprocates. His energy remains detached, his tone neutral, his words careful. He doesn't ask the questions that invite depth. He asks the ones that maintain distance. Even in moments of intimacy, there's an invisible wall between them, built not out of cruelty, but fear of being misunderstood, fear of being judged, fear of needing someone more than he's ready to admit. But when he meets the one, the walls begin to shift. At first, he doesn't even realize it's happening. He finds himself listening differently. He's not just hearing her words, he's feeling them. Her presence brings out something unguarded in him. Conversations that once felt like obligations now feel like moments of peace. He's drawn to her curiosity, to the way she listens without judgment, to the way she asks questions not to invade but to understand. Her calmness creates safety, and safety is something he's never truly known. He begins to share small pieces of himself, fragments of truth he's never shared before. Maybe he tells her about a difficult time in his past, a fear he's never voiced, or a dream he thought was too unrealistic to mention. These may seem like ordinary exchanges to anyone else, but for an avoidant man, they are monumental steps toward trust. He starts to realize that connection doesn't have to feel like exposure, it can feel like relief. Every time she listens with empathy instead of judgment, his defenses lower a little more. The shift from deflection to depth is not loud or dramatic, it's quiet and consistent. You see it in the way he starts to linger in conversations longer than necessary. You hear it in the pauses between his words, where honesty begins to replace caution. The man who once hid behind humor now allows silence, emotion, and sincerity to fill the space. He stops performing and starts sharing. He stops talking to impress and starts speaking to connect. With her, it's not about control anymore, it's about understanding. And when an avoidant starts opening up like that, it's not because he's changed overnight. It's because he feels emotionally seen. She doesn't rush him, doesn't push him to talk before he's ready. She simply gives him permission to be real. That kind of patience becomes the doorway to depth. He begins to associate her presence with peace, not pressure. It's in those quiet, unforced exchanges where the transformation happens. When she's just an option, he speaks to fill silence. When she's the one, he speaks to be known. His words gain weight, his tone softens, and his honesty deepens. Conversations with her start to feel like a mirror where he sees himself clearly for the first time. It's no longer about avoiding emotion. It's about embracing it. The same man who once hid behind shallow dialogue now uses his words to build something real. Because when he finally feels safe enough to be open, depth becomes his way of saying, "And you're not just another person in my life. You're the one who makes me want to show who I really am." When a man with avoidant tendencies sees a woman as just an option, his biggest fear is losing his freedom. Every interaction, every plan, every emotional expectation feels like a potential trap. He guards his independence like a lifeline, terrified that closeness will somehow strip away his sense of control. The thought of commitment doesn't excite him, it suffocates him. So he keeps things light and undefined, avoiding labels, avoiding emotional obligations, and avoiding the idea of we. He values the ability to come and go as he pleases, not realizing that this constant need for distance keeps him disconnected. When she asks for more time, more consistency, more emotional availability, he pulls back, convinced that her desire for closeness means the loss of his autonomy. He mistakes love for limitation. He tells himself he just wants space, but what he's really protecting is comfort. He wants to feel wanted but not needed. He wants to feel connected but not attached. He craves the affection that makes him feel alive, yet resists the vulnerability that comes with it. When she's just an option, he operates from self-preservation. Every romantic gesture, every moment of closeness comes with an internal calculation. How much of myself do I have to give? If the answer feels like too much, he withdraws. His fear of losing freedom is stronger than his desire to build intimacy, so he keeps everything casual, safe, and emotionally distant. But when he meets the one, everything inside him begins to shift. Suddenly, the freedom he once protected so fiercely doesn't feel as fulfilling as it used to. The late nights alone, the endless distractions, the emotional walls, none of it feels peaceful anymore. There's a quiet emptiness that connection with her begins to fill. For the first time, he feels the weight of what he could lose, and it terrifies him in a different way. He starts to fear something new, not losing his space, but losing her. It's not an immediate transformation, it's gradual, confusing, and deeply human. He begins to realize that this woman doesn't threaten his independence, she complements it. Being with her doesn't feel like a loss of self. It feels like expansion. She doesn't demand control over his life. She invites him to share it. Her energy doesn't confine him. It grounds him. He starts to feel safe in closeness, not suffocated by it. That realization is powerful for an avoidant man because it challenges his deepest belief that love equals loss. He begins to see freedom differently. When she's the one, freedom isn't about distance. It's about choice. It's the choice to stay because he wants to, not because he has to. The The same man who once resisted commitment now finds himself making small sacrifices willingly, adjusting plans, showing up when she needs him, and letting her see the parts of him he used to hide. Those choices are not made out of obligation, but out of genuine care. The fear of losing freedom fades as the fear of losing her grows stronger, and that fear doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from love. You can sense this shift in the way he behaves. The man who once prioritized personal space now values shared moments. The one who once avoided emotional conversations now initiates them. The same silence that once served as protection now feels heavy when she's not around. For the first time, he understands that connection doesn't take away freedom. It gives it meaning. Freedom without love feels empty. Love without freedom feels forced. With her, he finally experiences both. When she's just an option, his choices are about escape. When she's the one, his choices are about effort. He learns that true freedom isn't running away from connection, it's being brave enough to stay in it. The man who once feared losing himself in love discovers that loving her doesn't erase who he is, it brings out who he's meant to be. And that's when you know she's not just another chapter. She's the story he never knew he wanted to write. When a man with avoidant tendencies sees a woman as just an option, avoidance becomes his language. Every part of his behavior reflects resistance. Resistance to closeness, to vulnerability, to consistency. He doesn't openly reject her. He simply keeps her at a safe distance with silence, excuses, and half-hearted gestures. He might say things like, "I'm not good at relationships," or "I just need time to figure myself out," which sound honest but are often ways to justify emotional detachment. He'll show affection one day and withdraw the next, creating confusion that keeps her guessing. His effort feels conditional, based on comfort rather than care. When she reaches out, he delays his response. When she asks to spend time together, he suddenly becomes busy. His actions aren't cruel, they're protective. He's protecting himself from the risk of rejection, from the weight of emotional responsibility, from the vulnerability that comes with being seen too deeply. When she's just an option, he invests the bare minimum to keep her close, but never enough to make her feel secure. He wants the connection without the commitment, the intimacy without the emotional risk. His affection comes in flashes, temporary moments of warmth that vanish as soon as things get real. And because he knows she cares, he feels safe staying distant, assuming she'll always be there when he decides to return. But avoidance isn't absence, it's control. It's his way of holding power over when and how connection happens. It keeps him comfortable, predictable, and untouchable. But when he meets the one, avoidance begins to lose its grip. Something inside him starts to shift, not all at once, but slowly, subtly, through moments that surprise even him. He begins to notice how his usual strategies don't feel satisfying anymore. Ignoring her calls doesn't bring relief, it feels hollow. Pulling away doesn't create peace, it creates longing. The space he once used to protect himself now feels like punishment. He starts to realize that staying distant doesn't make him safe, it makes him lonely. And that realization is where effort begins. Effort for an avoidant man doesn't always look grand. It starts small, with a reply he doesn't delay, a conversation he doesn't escape, a plan he actually follows through on. He begins to show up not because he's suddenly fearless, but because being close to her feels more meaningful than staying hidden. The moments that used to trigger his retreat now trigger reflection. Instead of running, he starts asking himself why he's running. That's how love begins to rewire him. From avoidance to effort, from fear to connection. You'll see the difference not in his words, but in his consistency. When she's the one, his actions begin to align with his emotions. He texts back, not because he feels obligated, but because he wants her to know she matters. He plans things in advance, not to impress, but to show care. He may still struggle, still retreat at times, but the recovery becomes faster. The walls that once took months to break now lower in moments. His effort becomes his silent confession, his way of saying, "I'm trying because you're worth it," And for a man who has lived behind avoidance, effort is not easy. It's transformation. It's choosing connection over comfort, showing up even when it feels vulnerable, and allowing love to replace fear. The woman who is the one doesn't force that change. She inspires it through calm, patience, and emotional safety. With her, he learns that effort isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's not about doing everything right. It's about choosing not to run this time. When she's just an option, he avoids love to protect his heart. When she's the one, he risks his heart to protect the love. And that's the defining difference. Avoidance fades where effort begins, and effort becomes the quiet proof that she's no longer just another chapter in his life. She's the turning point that teaches him what real connection feels like.